Go. We're going right now. All
All
right.
right, we're
Here we
going.
are,
Welcome
episode
back,
5.
everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Fifth episode.
I
Nice.
yeah, I've added more stuff to the background. I still have some stuff off to get out there at some point, but I've largely been out of my room working.
It looks
Because
good
that's
though. I
fun.
love the lightsaber.
Lightsaber's great. I didn't really know where to put it, but like, oh, over here. It it works. It works.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah. It's good. I'm trying to figure out what I want to put on this table here. I might just like put my Skylanders here, but I might also try to put other stuff here on this wall, this tabletop. So yeah.
Definitely
Anyways,
something cool could go there.
we are now doing the show whenever we want, basically.
Yeah,
Um,
pretty much.
we already kind of were, but like we kind of just gave up on trying to have a scheduled time to do this. So here we are. What is this? Monday night.
Monday night.
So
I
when
mean,
we're recording,
weekends will probably still be the norm, but like
hopefully.
no guarantees.
Right. All
I'll
right.
be
Anyway,
back in
so
college next weekend, so my schedule will probably have a little more regularity to it then.
yeah, that's fun. Have you found out your roommate situation yet, or are you still gonna be
Un-
alone?
Unfortunately, I won't be alone. They assigned me
Oh,
a roommate today, so
oh.
that
Hopefully you get lucky there. We'll see.
I hope so. I have no idea who the guy is. Like, it can't be that bad, right? I
Right.
probably shouldn't say that.
Yeah, don't jinx it. Anyways, what do we want to talk about today? I have a little bit of a
Ah,
cold here, so my voice is not the best. But we want to start off with talking about um our theology topic for this episode, which is contemporary Christian culture.
yes, which is
And
an interesting
its
topic for sure.
growing presence within the Christian sphere. Maybe it's not even growing. It might be on the decline at this point. We never know.
Yeah,
Hard to
it's
say.
just
It's
the way.
certainly like gets more. It seems to get a lot more criticism now. As more and more people are, I guess, speaking up against it. Of course, it's some of it's a little bit tricky because, like, oh, is this really that bad? Yeah, it's a little bit tricky. But okay, so how do we want to define contemporary Christian culture?
I guess I would go about doing it kind of historically because I feel like prior to the 1900s in the West, there wasn't Christian culture and non Christian culture. There was pretty much just culture because the majority of people were Christians. But now we live in a very post Christian secular culture. And so the mainline culture is not inherently Christian anymore. And because of that, you have kind of this cessationist Christian culture that in some way kind of mirrors secular culture and in some ways kind of reacts to it and tries to give like a Christian spin to culture in general, I think.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Like the general, the challenge is basically they're reforming, I guess, the church to well to conform sort of to trends within the world. This is going to be most noticeable in CCM, contemporary Christian music. That's probably the best example that most people think of when you talk about it, which of course is going to be your hill songs, your Bethels, where their worship essentially looks just like a standard concert or something like that, and that
Yeah,
with all of your like electric instruments, your drums, and all of that, which obviously is very different compared to what music has been. I mean, throughout history in general, but especially church history.
right. Like we really haven't seen anything quite like the kind of music that you see in the church today until maybe like 45, 50 years ago. It's a very new kind of phenomenon. And for like the 1,500 years before that, there wasn't too much like musical development within the church. I mean, you went from like the Gregorian chant to a hymn. There's a little bit of development there, but it doesn't feel
Right.
as drastic as what we're seeing now.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, I, I'm kind of have a mixed opinion about it because I think it's very clear that it's somewhat of a problem, but it's like my entire church experience has pretty much contained CCM,
Mhm.
to the point where it's almost like it's so ingrained within my understanding of Christian culture that in some ways I've grown possibly too apathetic towards it, where I don't really like consciously object to it. I kind of just um consider it to just be present there, and I don't really try to speak out or do anything really against it. But I think especially the past few years, I've especially began to notice how I think bad a lot of the theology is within the songs.
Yeah.
um Obviously they are generally built off of the contemporary Christian rhetoric in some ways, which we'll
Mhm.
talk about later. Some of the a lot of worship songs, for example, seem to be less focused on God and more focused on the self, and
Yeah.
maybe see something like that. Like there's a lot of songs that could be even sung during worship time that have absolutely nothing to do with God. It just might like sound churchy or something like that, but and then of course there's other songs that just preach bad theology. I'm trying to think of an example right now. Like, wait, I know that you can probably think of an example, maybe.
Uh, See, like, I never listened to this stuff, so I'm actually having a
Mhm.
hard time thinking of an
Okay.
example of
I mean,
it.
like, I guess my best example is just going to be the I versus you, where
Yeah, sure.
um like there's a lot of songs where, gosh, I wish I could think of an example. There's a lot of songs that will say something like I, referring to the singer or the one singing, when you could replace it with you and direct what you're saying towards God, which would probably be more appropriate and more true and more correct. And I mean, there's even times where I'm like singing along with the song, and I'll intentionally switch I to you, just for the sake of actually making it a worship song, and less to do with oneself. Of course, like
Right.
like there's some cases like in the song like Gratitude where it's like how's it go?
I know the
Like
song you
where like
mean.
it's
I
like
just
come
don't know how it
on my
goes.
soul, don't you get come on don't you
Shy
get
on
sad
me.
and shy on me, something like that. Like I mean like again, like that's not necessarily directed towards God, but it's in a like it's not necessarily the worst thing to encourage oneself to um
Yeah.
to I guess this might sound bad, project more energy towards God. That sounds super new agey, but like like it kind of makes sense. Like it's not always necessarily a bad thing, but I think that there is so many instances where the songs really just seem to be more directed as like a self-help
Yeah.
motivational song instead of actual genuine praise. I feel like a lot of the upbeat songs that you'll see from CCM, I think oftentimes will go that way. I mean, often like some of them might not necessarily even be trying to be Christian music, but they're still going to be played like on Christian radio and maybe even at church
Right.
services. But yeah, that's just something I've noticed. And the funny thing is that I found that I tend to enjoy secular songs written by Christian artists opposed to Christian songs written by Christian artists, just because the secular songs they aren't trying necessarily to be anything more and but like they still even could have that Christian underlying those Christian values, so it still could be a good song, and oftentimes they're not going to be super nitpicky about the theology of it. So and I think that that sometimes just feels a little bit nicer if I'm not all of a sudden like, whoa, hold up, that's incorrect.
Right. I honestly have a lot of issues with CCM. Not because it's like contemporary or something. Like
Yeah,
I,
I forgot we
I
had
don't
this
think.
picture to pull up.
Oh yeah. I don't think the form the music the church takes matters too much. Like it doesn't
Right.
make too much of a difference to me whether you're singing a hymn or you're singing like some pseudo pop song. As long as it's praising God and it has correct theology, I think it's fine. Now, you have some problems there because many CCM songs do not have correct theology. And I think at the very least, many of them have like very shallow theology. Like, even if they're
Yeah,
not
I
saying
think
anything bad, there's not a lot of depth or richness there.
yeah, I definitely agree. I think the word shallow is definitely the best way to describe it for sure.
Mhm. Like if you listen to a hymn, a lot of times there's a real depth of theology there. Like you can
Right.
actually learn something by listening to the hymn. Like the one that always comes to my mind is the second verse of Hark the Herald Angels Sing, which says, Veiled in flesh, the Godhead see, hail the incarnate deity. Like it's talking about Christ and how he came to earth and how he's fully God and fully man.
Hmm.
There's a real theological depth there, and it's expressed very poetically. And you don't get anything like that from CCM.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. It's definitely CCM's definitely very, very shallow, very, very bare bones. And I mean, in some ways, like a lot of like the mega churches that have like their own bands or whatever, oftentimes will also be shallow in that theology,
Right,
unfortunately.
right.
Like I think Bethel is probably the best example of that. Bethel has had some wild theology come out of it, at least from what I've seen. I mean, I don't know necessarily the extent of it, but I've seen a variety of Christian slash theologian content creators breaking down some of uh Bethel. What's his name? Bill Johnson or something like that is the pastor there. His theology, it's not great. They what's Word of Faith. Word of Faith, that's like kind of the sect that you could place Bethel in, I think. Word of
Uh,
Faith is like a how do you want to describe it? It's like it's sort of like the like if you have enough faith, then God will do
oh
something in
yeah,
your life, type of thing. Like
it,
it's all tied. Like
it's kind of
if
like
you're not being healed, then you don't have enough faith. Stuff like that. Wish I could think of a more broad definition for word of faith. I don't know
it's
if
kind of like a little bit of a lighter version of prosperity gospel.
probably,
It's
yeah,
this same idea that if you're a Christian and if you really believe with all your heart that God's going to do something for you, he's going to do that thing for you.
hmm,
And maybe it's not quite as extreme because it's probably not saying that you're going to become a millionaire and drive a fancy car if you're a Christian, but
right.
it's still kind of the same
I'd say,
element of
yeah, I'd
if
say
you
that there are
follow God.
some, yeah, I'd say there's some parts of it that could be considered even more extreme than prosperity gospel, just because it goes
Sure.
beyond the financial realm, like,
Hmm.
and goes into like health and just like you even like argue social success.
Yeah, that's a little crazy.
Hmm. So it's dangerous, but anyways, let's get back to the CCM
Right,
talk.
back to CCM.
um
I think, though, you said earlier it kind of reflects Christian rhetoric, and I think that's what we're kind of seeing with like the bad theology of Bethel in conjunction with the shallow or bad theology of CCM music.
right. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. It really just it's completely shallow. It feels like it's doing like the bare minimum part of it, like give general praise to God.
Yeah,
Just a very general like level. It doesn't really go that deep. And like it, it is a like obviously like you're not getting all of your theology from your music. You also have like the sermons and stuff. So it's not necessarily like you have to get all like theology needs to be ingrained super deeply into the music,
yeah,
which is
fair.
why in some cases I like those secular songs by Christian artists where it's not going to try to cram theology down your throat. You don't need to nitpick it apart. It's just going to be enjoyable music that happens to be made by a musician that shares your worldview. um,
I think Christian music also kind of suffers from this kind of mindset that you can't do something to glorify God unless that something involves saying Jesus in every sentence multiple times. Well,
Uh-huh.
like I mentioned kind of earlier about how Christian culture used to just be culture because the vast majority of people were Christian. And I think that for many people at that time, there was this real sense that in my everyday work, I am glorifying God, even if I'm not necessarily doing so like super or overtly, like sharing my faith every step of the way and saying Jesus in every sentence. Just by doing my basic work and doing it well, I'm glorifying God. And I think
Mhm.
you can apply that to music. A Christian can glorify God by making really, really like objectively, critically good music. And I feel like Christian music is kind of implicitly saying, no, to glorify God, we have to make this music that's like super emotional and mentions Jesus in every other line.
Mhm. Yeah, I like what you're saying about, like, it's not necessarily critically acclaimed music type of stuff, and that obviously that's
Yeah,
a criticism that comes from not necessarily even just Christians, but, like, other musicians
right.
will just be like, "Yeah, this is pretty lazy writing, there's nothing super fancy going on
Yeah.
here," and again, like, going back to, like, those like, a lot of secular music might be more musically creative. They're
Mhm.
not going to repeat the bridge 17 times. They're gonna have, like, creative lyrics, stuff like that. And
Right.
while CCM, it just I feel, again, very general praise towards God. Um,
Very repetitive.
very repetitive, yeah, very repetitive. Bridge goes on for 2 hours, and then, like,
And then we're gonna take it to
again,
a
like
worship service and we're gonna add an extra 3 hours to it while we slice in another bridge from a different song.
right, right, and then they switch to the bridge. That's right, they do that. They did it so many. I can't with that.
Like this song has its
Oh,
own bridge, but we like this bridge better, so we're just gonna use this bridge
that's
instead.
so true. I can't. Oh, yeah. I don't. It's interesting. And, like, one thing I like is that I know that some, what do I want to call them, evangelical churches that will play CCM at, like, their services. Some of them have actually started to integrate other forms of music, like hymns, or
Yeah,
I mean, like, their own spin on some hymns or whatever within the music, or even just going straight vocals only type music. And I think that that's a good thing to do. Just get a little bit of variety in there. Like, even if it's like, even like just like a vocals only CCM could be a little bit more significant than just normal CC. I don't know. I feel like you understand what I'm saying. Type, like,
yeah, I do
it it
understand
it,
what you're
it
saying.
adds a bit of variety, and I mean it's sometimes cool to have hear an entire church singing.
Yeah, I agree. Like there's still people out there who really love hymns. I think there's this
Right.
common misconception that like every single Christian you'll ever meet is like it's a relationship, not a religion, and I hate hymns, and that's just not the case. There's many people who really love hymns, and I think that hymns have value and depth, and it's valuable to have them in church. Now, do we have to have only hymns? No, I don't think so. People like CCM, so give them the CCM, but
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with throwing in a hymn here and there too.
And, like, one nice thing that my church does, my current church, is that they offer basically two different types of services. They have their modern service, which will be with, like, CCM and their modernized auditorium with all the unnecessary lights and stuff. But they also offer a traditional service, which I've never actually been to, just because because I mean, just because of my schedule, I usually end up, because they start at, like, different times or whatever. It's usually because of my schedule, I go to the
Yeah,
modern one.
sure.
Maybe I'd like to go to the traditional one sometime, which is, from my understanding, like a traditional, like, Baptist sort of setting. Which, of course, like, yeah, I
Sure.
mean, like, how traditional is that? But, like, it's gonna be probably more of the hymns and um and stuff like that. Maybe, like, maybe more traditional aesthetic as well. So I think that's kind of a
Yeah.
cool thing that my church does.
Yeah. And I guess just one more to elaborate a little on one more criticism of CCM you mentioned before we move on is just how like individualistic it is. Like, I think part of this is just because it's largely written and performed in a very and arguably increasingly individualistic culture. But it is so like self-centered. All of it's always like me and God, me and God, me and God, and there's no like corporate dimension to it.
Yeah, I feel like you definitely don't hear the word "we"
Yeah,
as often as you'd hear "I,"
absolutely.
which I mean that's interesting. I guess. Yeah, I guess. We can go beyond the CCM conversation. Just go into some other aspects of contemporary Christian culture that are potentially problematic. I know we were talking about the sort of self-help theology that
Mhm.
you'd often hear in the sermons, how sometimes sermons may not even be like biblical exegetical sermons. They're more just be like a motivational self-help sermon that maybe pulls a couple Bible verses to reinforce that, which of course would be more eisegetical, which is typically not going to be great.
Mhm.
And obviously that's probably part of, I mean, it's where you get like all of these like um normal what am I calling it? Popular evangelical rhetoric from, it's just from these generally poorer sermons that aren't necessarily strictly biblical and obviously like super self-affirmative as well, which I think is very dangerous. I'm rambling off at this point. You got anything to add?
No, you're absolutely right though. I'm remembering this time at college when we were at one of their chapel services or whatever, and it was like praise chapel, so it was mostly like CCM songs, and they had one of those in between breaks where it's like, oh, now so and so on the worship band is going to share her testimony. And what she said is that I've come to realize that I am enough or something like
That's
that.
right. I
Like,
remember that.
God, it
Oh,
was so bad. It was like
and there
God
was the other
loves me
time,
just the way I am, and oh,
and
well,
then there was the one other one with the, it was like the worship leader, whether he was a guy, he was just like, it was something about like, I trusted God and then everything in my life went perfectly or something like that. And I was just like, great, good for you. Good for you, man.
yeah, yeah. I wish it had went that way for me, but maybe I just don't
Right,
have
right.
enough faith.
Yeah, maybe. It definitely has nothing to do with the fact that we're antisocial introverts who spend all our times in our rooms. That's crazy.
Yes, definitely not.
But yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I think a lot of this rhetoric too kind of borrows from like modern pop psychology. That's just like basically motivational self-help stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, pop psychology is definitely like a really great way to describe it. Um just like it seems to be just super affirmative. It seems
Yeah.
to it seems to oftentimes act as if suffering is something that can be avoided or may be avoided, type of thing, which is just, it's just completely wrong. I mean, like the Book of Job. Everyone should read the Book of Job. I think it does a really good job tackling that stuff. But
Oh yeah,
it's yeah,
absolutely.
hmm but, like it's like I feel like there's a lot of people who have lost their faith because of this type of rhetoric of oh, trusting God will somehow improve something. It'll cure your depression, cure your anxiety, something like that. And I think that there's a lot of people who are just like, hey, my life is in complete shambles. It sucks. Why? Where is God? I'm gonna stop believing in God because of that. And
Right.
that's a problem. And like, obviously, I don't know the statistics of like the reasons, the main reasons people walk away from their faith, but I'd suggest that that could be that type of Reddit could be something that causes people to question their belief in God entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe I've seen a survey where they asked people like, "What's the top reason you don't believe in God?" or something like that, and right at the top was like suffering or evil or something like that. And like again, there's this idea that like if I'm a Christian, nothing bad will ever happen to
Mhm.
me. And like as we've been saying, that's a very harmful idea.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the question of evil goes beyond the individual level, for
Yeah, for
that challenge for some people. But I do think that a lot of people may look at the suffering in their life and draw on that for their skepticism towards religion.
yeah, I think that's true.
Mhm. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about with this?
Um,
I mean, it's been 25 minutes.
yeah, we've gone. I guess the one thing I'll say is that like it's not necessarily always harmful to have like a motivational note to a speaker to
Right.
a sermon or something because there are people who genuinely need to hear that stuff. And like there is a lot in the Bible that is very encouraging. And I do
Mhm.
think that like following God is going to help you not necessarily heal or avoid suffering, but it will help you have a better way to handle that suffering.
Yeah.
So there's probably a grain of truth, at least, to some of the pop psychology stuff, but I think we've gotten to the point where it's just there's so much of it, and we hear it so often that it's no longer
Yeah.
a net positive.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it also might, in some ways, like obviously, I think the church has just a general problem of not giving opportunities for people to ask questions or to
Mhm.
bring forth their skepticisms. And I think that if you
Yeah,
continuously receive, I mean, this type of pop psychology, affirmative, uh, like hopeful, optimistic type of preaching, then that might just be like a turnoff to some people that have genuine skepticism that they would like to get answered, but all they get is this like fairly shallow general self help stuff. And I don't know.
yeah, for sure. And I think there's a lot of people where it's like just throwing like some cliche pop psychology at them it really doesn't help them at all. Like everyone's heard this junk a million times at this point, and it really has most of the time it doesn't emotionally impact me at all. It's just another slogan I've heard a million times that does nothing for me. Like give me
Mhm.
a real substantial answer. Let's have a
Right.
real conversation about it. Don't just feed me another slogan.
And that was one of the like one of the many reasons for me seeking a new church is just because it felt like at times a lot of the sermons felt more that way.
Yeah,
And then, of course, my current church is typically much more exegetical, theology focused sermons, which I enjoy a lot more, and I think I got a lot more out of. I definitely have an easier time paying attention to those sermons instead of zoning
yeah, for
out,
sure.
which is good.
Well, do
All right,
we want to
but
move on now? I'm
I
sure
think
we could
I
talk
think
about this
what do
topic
we?
longer, but
True, true. We're gonna take just a complete. We're just gonna go completely random. We're gonna go all of a sudden. We're gonna do a tier list. Switching gears all the way.
yeah, complete
I
switching
feel like we should
gears.
just get like a set structure every time. That might be beneficial instead of just like, oh, here's an idea. Let's do this now.
I mean, it
No,
would be
anyways,
beneficial, but we've never done anything that's structured in our lives. So,
true, true. All right, so today's tier list, we're going to be making a tier list of Christopher Nolan movies because we like Christopher Nolan movies.
yeah,
And obviously, there's the recent announcement for his next film and the cast for that film, which we'll talk about afterwards a little
yes,
bit. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and uh, go here and we'll do this tier list. So obviously, there's a couple movies that we haven't seen. I already put those in that tier.
and
But
the
anyways,
thing is, I have not seen Oppenheimer, so that'll be just you rating that
that'll be
one
just me.
by me.
That's right. That's right. Okay. All right. I don't even know. Okay, let's start with Batman Begins. I think that's this one. Yeah, this is Batman Begins. All right. Batman
Yes.
Begins, I really like. It is in my top 50 movies. I think it's a really solid Batman origin story. Um, of course, it's a little bit slower at times, but
Yeah.
I really like Cillian Murphy's Scarecrow in it, and then of course
Yeah.
Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul is pretty good as well. It's Liam Neeson, so obviously top 50 movies for me. But of course, the majority of these movies are in my top 50. So,
Right.
are we gonna? I don't know. We didn't really like. Are we going to rate these in relation to one another or movies in general?
I think we need to rate them in relation to one another because
I think
otherwise
so.
everything's just an S and A tier. And
Right,
like
right.
that's not very entertaining
I
to
don't think there'll
watch
be
or
anything in
rate.
F still, but yeah,
I don't think
fair.
so. Maybe like one
I'm
thing in
gonna
C.
I'm gonna put this in A. It might end up lower A. We'll see.
I think
What's your
lower A
thoughts
is
about
fair for Batman Begins. It's been a little bit since I've watched it to be fair, but like it had the feel of a Nolan movie, and that's the feel in a movie I really like. Yeah, it was a fun movie to watch. I enjoyed it. I felt like it put a unique spin on the Batman origin story, kind of, and great acting across the board, great visuals.
it?
So I think low A tier is pretty fair here.
Oh, A. Okay. All right. I think let's just do the Dark Knight trilogy.
Yeah, man.
I don't know which one is which though.
I don't even
I
remember
can't
what
tell.
their names are, honestly. There's the second one and there's the third one.
The second one, there's the Dark Knight and then the Dark Knight Rise. I think this one is the Dark
I,
Knight. I'm pretty
I
sure.
believe so.
Okay. Anyways, the Dark Knight, obviously one of the best superhero films, probably of all time.
I
It's
think
obviously
so.
in my top 50. Of course, I understand the criticism of this not really being a Batman movie because it is essentially a Joker movie.
Yeah.
Heath Ledger's Joker is the reason people love this movie. His performance is phenomenal. I mean, obviously, in the Dark Knight trilogy, I'd argue that Batman is one of the least interesting parts of it.
Mm.
Funnily enough, but it's really, I think it's really well done. I really like how Joker essentially succeeds in his plan. Um, and obviously, The Dark Knight Rises kind of continues what Joker actually did in some ways, dealing with essentially the fabrication of the truth that goes on from Commissioner Gordon to lie about Harvey Dent's downfall. But I think it's really well done. Obviously, S tier. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. This has to be an S tier movie. I mean, to be fair, the reason I watched this movie is for Joker. Like, Heath Ledger put on one of the greatest performances of all time, I think. You know what? I'm going to say that Heath Ledger's performance in this movie is the greatest acting in any superhero movie. It is absolutely phenomenal. I
Sure.
agree that maybe Batman isn't the most interesting part of this movie, but even if he's a fairly, I don't want to say mediocre character, even if he's not that interesting of a character in this movie, the story of it still is just great. So yeah, S tier movie, 100%.
S tier. All right. All right. And then Dark Knight Rises. Obviously, I agree with the general population that it's the worst
Yeah,
of the trilogy. Well, I guess there are some people who love this movie. I know of one person who thinks it's the best in the trilogy. They can have
I
that
don't think
opinion.
so.
I
This movie
disagree.
does one of the things I hate the most in any franchise. And that's where they take an event that's happened in a previous movie and then they spin it around so that it's like a completely different event. I believe they did that in the Amazing Spider, one of the Spider-Man series is too, where in the third movie they just completely changed what happened in the first movie. I hate it when you do
Yeah.
that. Just
What was the example in Dark Knight Rises?
It has to do with Ra's al Ghul and like how the guy escapes the pit or whatever, something like that. I think they did that. I hope I'm not just going
Uh,
completely crazy.
like later you're talking about like the twist about that, how it was actually Talia al Ghul that escaped the pit and not Bane. Is it? I just
I'm gonna look it up because I feel like I'm going crazy right now.
all right. Well,
I
anyways, I'll
guess I
talk
would
about more
probably
while you look at. So, first
okay.
of all, I think there's way too much happening in this film. It's very very long, and it does feel very very long at times. Talia al Ghul was honestly boring, not the most interesting villain in it. Of course, she's a twist villain. I think they should have just had Bane be the main villain. Obviously, the Bane's confrontation with Batman, probably one of the best scenes in this movie. But anyways, there's just way too much happening, way too much loose ends, probably from the Dark Knight that they had to incorporate in there. Personally, I'm probably gonna put this in C tier for Nolan movies. It would probably be B tier overall. You found anything?
I have no idea what I was talking about, honestly. I agree with C tier for this movie,
Okay.
and someday I'll rewatch it and see whether or not I'm going completely insane.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll move on to next one. Dunkirk. Let's see, Dunkirk.
I think we watched this one pretty recently, actually,
We did.
sometime
We
last
did.
semester.
Dunkirk, it's honestly it doesn't blow my mind as much as other Nolan films have, but I think it's a very, very interestingly crafted film. I guess that's the word I'll use. I really like how they, I guess, have like the multiple plot lines, and they're all kind of intertwined in some way or another. Um,
Yeah,
this is probably one of for me the least memorable of Nolan films. Um,
sure.
Probably.
I, I don't
I
think
don't
that's
know.
unfair. I
Yeah,
guess
but
I
I
feel
do
like.
think.
Sorry, you go ahead.
You go.
Okay. I I think kind of the weakness of this movie is there's not like one main character who you can really focus on. There's a little too much going on with it, which makes it hard to like really focus on one main plot line and really feel for that one person. Now, Nolan does do a
Right.
really great job making us feel for the many characters he comes up with. And I think it's a
Hmm.
great movie, but when you look at it in like the pantheon of Nolan movies, I think it's probably a B tier movie.
B tier. Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking lower B. um. Yeah. Yeah. Of course, I think I appreciate it more for its artistic creativity, more so than actually enjoying the film. But yeah, I think B tier is a good place. Interstellar.
We talked
Interstellar.
about this on here recently.
We did. We did. Interstellar, obviously, we went to the re-release in theaters. It was phenomenal. um, there are problems with this movie, however. First off, I think the first act is a little bit slow. You can argue that it's understandable just to craft the world, the stakes, the relationships. Okay, that's fine. But I still think it drags a little bit. Whenever I rewatch Interstellar, most of the time, I'll oftentimes just skip through that part or most of that part and just get to when they actually get into space. But is that um other than that though, I think it's genuinely phenomenal. There's multiple mind-blowing moments. How Nolan worked in like relativity with the black hole. I thought it was very, very cool to see that. Obviously, you have the is it Miller's planet with the water, the waves. Whatever, whatever it
Uh,
is. That
I
planet,
want to say that's Miller's planet. Yeah.
that scene is super tense and really, really cool. The visuals are are quite fascinating. I think yeah, it's really good, and especially I really like um how they're able to show the relationship between Cooper and his and Murph, his daughter, even if it's only in a handful of scenes throughout the movie. I think they show that relationship very, very well. So for me, I'm gonna put Interstellar. Um, I'm gonna put it S. I don't know, lower S or higher A. I'll hear your opinion.
I'm not going to talk about this movie too much because I rambled on about it for probably half an hour, 2 episodes ago, or whatever. But it's a great movie. It has its issues, as you said. But yeah, I love this movie. It's probably in my top 30. I'm going to say probably higher A this time, probably the very top of A. But I could see it in
Okay.
lower S as well.
Okay. Let's just keep it in higher A for now.
Okay.
Inception. So Inception is my favorite movie, my highest rated movie. So it's obviously going to go top of S tier for me. I think this movie, first of all, very, very unique. There's not really anything like it. Very, very creative. I love the way that they work with time, the dream world, the different levels within the dream. I think some of the characters are quite fascinating. The relationship between DiCaprio and or what's his name? Cobb.
Cop,
Cobb
yeah.
and Maul is kind of interesting, very, very tense. It's such a unique, creative film that like you really don't see anything else like. um and just the visuals, of course, are very, very cool. I find it fast. I love how Nolan is able to like twist and turn with and deal with time in creative ways in a lot of his films, and I think that it works really well right here. Performances like it's a very well crafted film. There are maybe a couple of problems. I can't really think of any major problems off the top of my head, but it really is just it's such a cool film, and I enjoy it every single time. There's not a ton of movies that like I will I'll never complain about rewatching. So Inception's number one movie for me.
Yeah, this is a perfect movie, honestly. Easily my favorite Nolan movie. I can't put it above the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Those are my three favorite movies of all time. But this is in fourth place. I
Yeah.
just
I
love
mean,
this
for
movie
me, it,
so
like
much.
that's difficult for me as well because, like, I mean, if I'm looking from an objectively critical standpoint, I would put the three Lord of the Rings movies above Inception. Three Lord of the
Sure.
Rings movies are in my top 10.
Mhm.
And it's just that like do I it's just that would I rather watch Inception or would I watch a 4.5 hour Lord of the Rings movie? I think most of those situations I'll go with Inception, but of course, Lord of the Rings, it's hard not to love them, and maybe they actually are higher than Inception in my personal ranking. It's just that Inception just has that cool factor and that creativity factor that's what pushes it above them for me.
Yeah, this movie's great. Just looking at the poster makes me want to rewatch it, honestly. And
Right, right,
just like there's like two or three massive reveals about Cobb's past throughout this movie, and every single one hits like an absolute boss. Like this is a
right,
great
right.
movie. It one of the greatest movies of all times.
Mhm. So you would definitely put it above Dark Knight as well.
It's top of S tier. Nothing's gonna beat it.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Tenet. So I said this. I feel like I said it to you. I think Tenet is a bad movie, but it is a really cool movie. I really love the idea of inversion, whatever they call it. I think that it's really cool. I wish that they did a little bit more with that in some ways, but it sort of makes sense. My main problems with this movie, one, not giving your protagonist a name doesn't help people relate or connect to that character. So I think he's one of he's probably the least interesting part about the movie, quite frankly. Other problems, it's a little bit long. It
Yeah.
is quite long at times. Also, it's also quite hard to follow, especially when I first watched it in theaters. Very, very hard to follow at times what's actually happening. And I mean, maybe that's intentional on Nolan's part. I don't know. I just don't think it really worked well for this film. But the thing is just that there's so many cool scenes. My favorite scene has to be when um they go back through the airport,
Mhm.
inverted, where they go through that whole fight scene again from the other angle. I thought that was just really, really
Yeah,
cool to
that's
see
really
that.
cool.
So it does absolutely have the cool factor. It's just that they aren't the strongest characters or the strongest plot to make it super interesting. Personally, I'm gonna put this in upper B above Dunkirk.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think this is a bad movie, actually. Like I understand why you would say that, and I agree that the emotional payoff here is very lacking. And I'm especially annoyed by that scene where that one lady shoots her husband like before she's supposed to.
That's
Like
uh-huh,
you could
uh-huh.
have waited 30 seconds to shoot your husband. It was not that long. That part just annoys me. But I think
Yeah.
it's a really cool movie. I think it's really well shot. I enjoyed watching it. Yeah, I think upper B tier is fair. And I will say that I think Nolan is at his absolute best when he's really leaning into the emotional payoff side of his movies and movies like
Mhm.
Interstellar and Inception, and you just don't get that in Tenet.
Right, right. That's definitely fair. Next up is Memento. Memento is, I want to say top 15 movie for me. So I really love
Already,
Memento.
wow.
Again, maybe top 20. I don't know. It's up there. I really, really like it. I think obviously the story is told in reverse, which is very, very cool. It's unlike really any other movie that I know of. And and obviously there's you get more and more information every time it skips back further in time, which I think adds a lot of twists
Yeah,
and turns. And of course, you have the big reveal at the end, which of course basically makes the entire movie a twist, which I think is quite interesting. Obviously, Memento is a movie that doesn't necessarily get better with every new watch because you basically know everything that's going to happen. But just as a first time viewing film, it is absolutely phenomenal. So I'm gonna go S tier behind Dark Knight.
S tier, all right. I don't think this is an S tier movie for me. I've only seen it once, and I do think you should see every Nolan movie twice. So keep that in mind
Okay.
with my rating. But I can't bear to put it above Interstellar, honestly. It's a great movie. I mean, it's a Nolan movie, and like the way the story is told is really creative, really great, but it just doesn't hit as hard as Interstellar for me.
Sure, sure. So where do you want to place it?
For me, it'd probably be at the
Here,
bottom of A tier for me. To
bottom of
compromise,
A.
let's put it either behind or in front of Interstellar in A tier.
Okay. We'll just put it in the middle of A tier.
Okay, fair enough.
Um all right, Oppenheimer. Obviously I've only seen Oppenheimer. I think it's a really, really well done historical film. I gotta give him props for that. um it's just really, really long. And like I'm not gonna lie, the last like the third act drags on forever. um, and although it is fairly engaging through that, it just goes on for absolutely forever. Which of course in the theater you have to go to the bathroom, you can't just pause it. So I
Right.
mean, there's that. For me personally, um, I mean, the one thing that ruined this movie for me is the sex scenes. I don't think they're necessary at all. And it's the only reason the film is rated R, pretty much. Which I think is just stupid. You could have made a lot more money if you made it PG-13 without taking out too much of the story. So I mean, I don't know why Nolan went for that direction. And obviously that's a big hit for me rating a movie. So I'm personally gonna put this probably in B tier. um, Basically just because of that. I know a lot of people are angry at that. That's fine. I'm putting it B tier.
All right.
And last one is The Prestige. I think The Prestige is very underrated.
Mhm.
Um, it is quite a it's an interesting and cool film. Um, what do I want to actually rate it? That's the question. But you wanna give your thoughts?
I don't know whether to put this somewhere. I don't know whether this is a high A movie or a low S tier movie because this is a
Interesting.
really good movie. I feel like it's one of Nolan's best movies, honestly.
Mhm.
And again, it's another movie that I need to watch for a second time.
Sure, sure.
But I just love the way he kind of subverts your expectations throughout the whole movie, culminating in the final reveal.
Right,
And
right.
it's one
Yeah.
of those dark movies where you just see the way that like the protagonists' lives are gradually destroyed throughout the movie. And I
Right.
honestly enjoy those kind of movies.
Mhm. Yeah, and
I think
I
I would
really
put it
enjoy
high A tier.
okay. Yeah, I really enjoy, this movie. I think this is the movie I use to show how to play the twin card correctly,
Mhm.
unlike Glass Onion. Um, yeah, I thought that just the build up to the reveal, the character work on the 2 magicians, I forget their names, or whatever, Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. I think both do a really good job. It shows just that general destruction that even like a grudge of some sort can cause. Definitely gets into that darker turn. um, Personally, my main issue is how it basically just goes full blown fantasy by the end, with all the Tesla stuff, which I think is interesting. It's cool, I guess, but it does feel sort of in some ways out of place for this film, but obviously it does serve its purpose within it, so I don't have too much of an issue with that. I think high A makes sense. I'd probably put it behind Memento, though.
Fair enough.
Okay, there you go. This is gonna be a long show.
That's
52
all right. We
minutes
had a
in.
short one last week.
True, true. Anyways, all right. So, what do we want to talk about now? We're gonna talk
We can
about
briefly talk
Nolan's
about the
next
next Nolan
movie.
movie.
Let's do this. All right. So obviously Nolan's next movie has been announced to be The Odyssey, which is an adaptation of the the classic. I know you've read the original. I haven't, so you probably know a lot more about this than I do. Obviously we have the cast revealed on the right there. So what's sort of your thoughts about it since you're more familiar with it?
Um, I think this is a really ambitious project. Obviously, that's not an original thought. That's what everyone's been saying since this whole thing was revealed. But I think if anyone can pull off a film adaptation of the Odyssey, it's going to be Christopher Nolan. And like, this
Mhm.
is a crazy cast here. This is just an absolutely stacked cast. Someone decided to cast Zendaya in it, which was a mistake. But like I'm
Very
excited,
true. That was
honestly.
kind of the one. That's like the one cast. I'm just like, of course, of course. Yeah, why not?
Right.
Tom Holland can't do anything on his own now. Zendaya has to be in it too. The Tom Holland. I feel like all his characters he plays is just Peter Parker variants.
Pretty
But
much.
I do think he has some unused talent.
I,
Zendaya,
I
I'm
think
less
so. He's
sure.
a good actor.
Sure,
I
sure.
don't understand
Obviously,
why
like
Zendaya continues to be in everything. C- I feel like she's one of those like flash in the pan actors. Like right now, Timothy Chalamet is in
Timothy
everything.
Chalamet, Zendaya,
Like
Pedro
last
Pascal.
year, Pedro Pascal was in everything. But like Zendaya's time is over. She was the big news like 2 or 3 years ago, and some reason she's still in everything. Like I don't understand. She's not that great or anything.
Yeah, I mean, this is like just like a criticism of just celebrity actors in general. Is like,
Yeah,
is that I feel like a lot of like it's just like I wish that people would be drawn to films despite the actors, and the actors shouldn't be your draw to the film. Although
Mhm.
obviously there's some cases where okay, cool. Like I think Tom Cruise is probably like the best example of being able to bring an audience, though like even he
Sure.
um didn't do didn't really do that for Dead Reckoning Part 1. I guess it's just Dead Reckoning now. But yeah, like honestly, I just kind of I don't I kind of just want actors to do their job well, and I don't really care if
Right.
there's like you have people like Dwayne the Rock Johnson who basically just decided to start acting because he can, and he's just a celebrity, so people watch it despite the fact that he's not the best actor. And there's I think a few examples of that. And I mean sometimes it could work. I thought Dwayne did good as the voice of Maui in Moana.
Yeah.
I mean what else has he been in?
Uh,
What else
I,
has he been this guy? I
I
don't
mean,
even
he
know. I
does
don't
the
care.
same thing in every single
True,
movie.
true. And I mean,
So, like, if
like
you have a character that fits that, he's good at
right,
that.
right. And I think like and that's another challenge is that sometimes like they are good in the film. I mean, like another example could even be like Ryan Reynolds. And I think Ryan Reynolds'
Yeah.
character is a little bit more entertaining, at least for me personally, but it's also a personal
Right.
preference. And I think that Ryan Reynolds has a little bit more acting capability, acting range, even if he doesn't really use it in the modern day.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's.
But yeah. Anyways, hey, that's completely off topic. Back to this.
But yeah, this is a crazy cast. I really, really hope this movie is a success because I think it's really cool that Christopher Nolan is trying to make an adaptation of like an absolute classic of literature. And I don't think he's going to try and do one of those things where it's like, actually, we're just going to make it entirely modern day. I don't think he's going to take that route. I think this is going to try and be like a historically accurate, if you can say that about like a mythical story.
Sure. Yeah, and I think Nolan definitely is not going to try to do anything super crazy to like ruin the
Yeah,
story. um,
right.
like if like I hope like if you like Denis Villeneuve, I think did a pretty good job adapting Dune. Even though a lot of people think that book is unadaptable, he did it and made two pretty good films out of it.
Yeah,
So, and I think that the just Hollywood in general is starting to realize that oh, maybe we should respect the source material a little bit more, because or else nobody's gonna see it. We have to make money somehow, and we're starting to see the the anti woke ripple or whatever ripple effect coming through.
yeah,
We'll see if it actually changes anything. I mean, maybe Trump will scare them into submission or something. I don't know. Anyways, yeah, I think that Nolan will do a good job with this. Whether yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Obviously, when we get more information, like a trailer, which I mean, the trailer probably won't be possibly for another year. I don't know. Then we'll be able to be a better judge of that. I think.
right.
Right. Oh, 58 minutes in, we're just getting to the
8 minutes.
culture war topic. All right.
Culture war has been a little bit shorter of a conversation the last one or two times, so we'll see how
Sure,
long this
sure.
goes.
Let's go back to this. Okay, what is the topic that we did for that?
Our
Right,
topic
right,
today
right. Okay.
is secular versus religious conservatism.
Yeah. So we kind of just pick whatever topic at this point
Yeah,
to do, which is fine. I mean, maybe we can get more specific, but like what we want to break down what I consider to be the what do I want to call it? The biggest divide within the Republican Party at the moment, or just political conservatism at the moment, which is going to be obviously between the religious and secular types, and sort of this dynamic. Because at least for me, I don't necessarily I see the Trump victory, and I'm glad Trump won to a certain extent. Of course, can we get better candidates ever? I don't know. But like
Yeah,
the thing that was most apparent to me is like how much of our conservative Christian morality did we sacrifice just to gain a few votes? That's the
right.
thing that I think has been particularly concerning for me because, and if you look, political conservatives have become more tolerant towards LGBTQ people. They've
Mhm.
loosened their stance on abortion. Obviously, Trump himself basically is pro-choice. He just wants the states to be
Yeah,
able to decide. So, I mean, sure, that's better than what Kamala thinks, but I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, you're moving away from what, in theory, should define conservatism. At least in my, obviously, that's my opinion.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's fair. And like the Republican Party and conservatism in general is like just such a weird melting pot at this point that it's really hard to please everyone. Because on the one hand, you have like the boomers who have been here forever, and like some of them are Christians, some of them probably just grew up in a time when the world was older and they're not quite yet ready to sacrifice everything they grew up with for the new liberal agenda. And then you have like the red pill young men side of the party who are like not buying into the whole feminism oppressor narrative that, the left is telling us right now. And then you have like, I think the Republican Party is becoming increasingly multicultural too. Like you have a lot of Hispanic people, a lot of Black people who really aren't buying into the narratives anymore that the left is feeding them, and joining the.
Mhm. Yeah, and like, but the interesting thing is that like even those multicultural, there still is going to be a divide within those smaller sects of conservatism, and then of
Mhm.
course, which brings into the larger context of that divide between secular and religious
Yeah,
subgroups within the subgroups within the subgroup, like that type of thing. And the thing is, the challenge is that the religious conservatives are either going to say something like the secular conservatives are either being too tolerant or too willing to sacrifice on Christian morals, or they're going to possibly even say that they're being too harsh or we should be more loving, more compassionate, something like that.
yeah,
And of course, the secular conservatives are going to criticize the religious types by saying that they are like by they're going to criticize them for essentially, you could even say tanking the movement by being I guess stuck in the past or stuck and unwilling to move forward, which of course as culture progresses, Christianity is getting more and more unpopular.
right.
So the more you stick with Christian morals, the theoretically the less votes you get or whatever. So I've heard criticisms like that, but like they also might say these Christians are too compassionate. They're too empathetic towards others. We need to be a little bit. We need to be like the firm, strong hand, something like that.
Yeah.
I guess is that those are kind of like that's just kind of my breakdown of how I see the issue and the main criticisms of each that each side has of each other.
I think that's fair, and I think in general the religious and specifically the Christian side of the conservative movement is kind of in a tricky position these days because like a lot of the things we believe in really are not at all popular on like a broader societal level, like abortion. Really, the only people opposing abortion are Christians. That's it. And there are many
Yeah,
Christians even who think abortion is fine or whatever. So it's tricky. And then we get to the election, and it's like obviously the Republican Party isn't going to nominate someone who's super pro life because that's going to alienate a lot of voters. So we get
right.
Trump, who's like borderline pro choice with like a tiny caveat to try and bring in the Christian voters. And then I, as a Christian, feel like my only option is to vote for Trump, who I don't really agree with on this issue, and I don't really feel like he cares about this issue. But obviously, I'm not going to vote for Kamala, who's 100 times worse.
Yeah, it's like they're intentionally trying to please as many people as possible by just saying, "Oh, we're less this than the Democrats," and that's their entire
Yeah,
appeal, which might be a winning strategy as far as getting the numbers needed to win an election, but isn't necessarily the moral strategy that's going to actually allow for positive trends, changes, whatever you want to call it.
right, exactly. Like it works on an election level, as we just saw this past November, but like, are we sacrificing something we can't afford to sacrifice just to win the White House? Maybe, might be.
Yeah, and I think that unfortunately, the way things are going at the moment, it could change in 4 years. I don't really know, but it seems as if Christians are going to have a harder time finding a party to identify with. I mean, the saying like is like Republicans are just Democrats 10 years ago.
Right,
So in 10 years, like, are we even going to be able to have be able to like say like, oh, we can vote for this person or something? Like even now, you have Christians who are just like, I refuse to vote for either of these candidates because I don't identify
right.
with them. I think
Which is
obviously
what
like
I did, to be fair.
yeah, I mean you also were out of your state at the moment, so it's like there's
Yeah,
that as well.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, but and obviously like the thing is like the point that those Christians that chose to do that, that point's probably going to become more and more prevalent.
Hmm.
And I mean, next thing you know, and like the thing is, if your party loses the Christian vote, it's not going to look pretty good.
Hmm.
For like, if Republicans lose the Christian vote entirely, it's over for them. So obviously, they have at least some incentive to try to cater towards Christians. And I mean, like, even still, a lot of them will at least claim Christianity. Um, of
Right.
course, like it's debatable whether they are like or whatever, but at least at the moment, they at least recognize, oh shoot, we actually should cater to them. And I mean, the Democrats definitely didn't cater to Christians. As a matter of fact, they were oftentimes actively
Not at
opposed.
all.
Obviously, you have the
I mean, there
infamous
was that clip
Kamala
of
moment
Kamala. Yeah, you're at the wrong convention, whatever.
at the wrong convention. Yeah,
Yeah,
but like
great job,
it's it's
Kamala.
it's like in 10 years, can we still say, oh yeah, we can vote? We can vote with a clear conscience for the Republican Party because they're not the Democrat Party, or is it just going to get so detached from Christian ethics and morals that it's just not, you can't even consider that when entering the polls. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict the future for sure. I do wonder if we won't eventually get to a place kind of like where Great Britain is at right now, where Christians really, evangelical Christians specifically, really don't have any political power. And while they might generally tend to align with one party more than the other, they're more pursuing their like Christian objectives on a more kind of, they're pursuing them on the ground more than on a higher level. They're going from a bottom up rather than a top down perspective because they just don't have the influence to do the top down perspective anymore. And I do wonder if we won't eventually
Right,
get to
right.
that place in American politics.
Hmm.
Now,
For sure.
obviously, in America, you have a much higher percentage of people who are Christians than Great Britain. So, will we get to that point? I don't know, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like I saw something about it. I want to see like that breakdown of the Christian majority that's in this country
Mhm.
because I mean, I think there's too high of an amount of pseudo Christians in the country.
Yeah,
So it's like yeah, like I hesitate to say there even is a Christian majority in the country, but at least beyond in
I
name
think
only. But anyways, yeah, is there anything else we want to discuss with that, or we can go through the few Twitter bookmarks I have.
Yeah, I don't have a ton on that. It's a pretty deep topic, and there's a lot you can say about it, but
Uh-huh.
ultimately it's really hard to say anything truly objective because it's so complicated.
For sure. All right. Anyways, on to Twitter. I think I have like 5 or so bookmarks.
Nice. We took a break from Twitter last week, so it'll be
So
nice to
I do.
back.
All right. So let me get this set up here. I'm gonna do this. Okay. Here's our first one. So this is just discuss. I feel like we should do a discussion on this at some point on
Oh yeah, this is a
creationism,
good
different views
topic.
of creation.
I know
But maybe
we've
we could
talked
just give
about
like
this before, you and I.
yeah, yeah, definitely. But honestly, like the thing about this post was actually the comments, because it seemed like the majority of the comments were actively hostile towards old Earth creationism. Um,
Mhm.
and obviously, like, let me see if I know Zoomer replied to this. Let me see if I can find which one. he he didn't even try to argue it. He just basically just had a troll post. I don't know. I
Of
don't know.
course we did.
We'll just go. He posted that he was basically a Darwinist, theistic evolutionist, whatever. Zoomer moment.
And he's made no secret of that on his YouTube channel either. Like
Yeah,
I
oh yeah,
feel like that's
absolutely, yeah.
pretty common Zoomer knowledge if you know Zoomer.
Yep. It's probably his most controversial view at this point, at least amongst his own fan base. Other than of course the Protestantism thing. But yeah.
Other than literally being not Catholic.
Anyways,
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah. I'll try and share
it
my belief on this real briefly. So
sure.
I believe in the literal 6-day creation. I have absolutely no problem with those who disagree with me, and I think both are very reasonable views with sufficient evidence for them to be like legitimate viewpoints.
What's my view, Brick? So I mean, my general view is kind of just like I really don't care as long as you
Yeah.
believe that God created and He
Mhm.
is the creator. Then if you want, like, I don't really care what your specifics on it are. My view is I don't think there's like absolute certainty in the literal 6 days. um, I think obviously secular science points to old Earth. Um, there are obviously some Christian scientists that have been gathering evidence that points to young Earth. My problem with that is that that to me just feels biased from the start. So I forgive me if I don't trust the Christian scientists um, more than the atheist scientists. I think it's actually because of God's attribute of omnipresence being outside of time. I think you could actually make it so that the 6 days are literal and old Earth creationism is true. It can get a little bit confusing there, but uh I don't know. I think I might just make like an individual video explaining my view on that. I don't know. I'd say
That would be
so. I grew up
interesting.
always with literal 6 days, and um, honestly, I really don't even have like a set in stone view of creation.
Yeah,
I think there's no way to know for absolute certain what it is. I'm just not going to like. I have yet to been convinced by enough evidence of one way or another. Usually evidence to oppose one of the views. I just haven't seen a lot of that. Most of the evidence seems that people use seems to be pro their perspective.
right.
Um, but yeah. Anyways, all right, we can get to the next one.
Yeah, and we
I
should
see
talk
here.
about this further sometime because it is an interesting topic.
Sometime for sure, for sure. All right, so here's the next post. Obviously, you have the Garden of Eden picture with Eve and the serpent.
Mhm.
Anyways, this is the main tweet that went semi-viral. um, yeah. So I can't. Oh, this view baffles me.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
I've heard this before. I don't
So
understand. Whoa, I just don't get this.
here's the thing.
I'm not married, so
Nobody,
keep that in mind.
every single person that thinks sexual compatibility matters is probably not has already failed at saving themselves from marriage,
Yeah,
and are not virgins. um, on top of that, I think just from in general, the idea of sexual compatibility is stupid.
mhm,
I think that that's only something that people would care about in like a one night stand hookup sort of fashion,
yeah,
but that's retarded. And I mean, thankfully, most people. It seems to be that the general, I guess, maybe Gen Z, whatever, young people seem to be rejecting hookup culture for the most
yeah,
part. Of course, hookup culture is not hookup culture is just the logical conclusion of sexual liberation in general. Obviously, not saving sex till marriage is basically what causes hookup culture to occur, given enough time. So like just because you reject hookup culture does not mean you're all of a sudden some like sexually pure individual by biblical standards. But anyways, this idea is so dumb. It's so I it doesn't I cannot think of any reason as to why this would matter outside of
yeah. I don't get it.
yeah it's yeah.
But
And
like
I
from a
mean
biological perspective and like an anatomy perspective, this doesn't make sense.
mhm.
This is not
plus like
how it works.
plus like first of all, if you save yourself from marriage, you only have sexual experience with one person, one other person,
Yeah.
and you have your entire life to get better at it.
Mhm.
So you can essentially make yourselves sexually compatible given enough time, which is why I say that this only
Right.
applies in the hookup culture context.
Which what
Yeah,
people in that context are getting married anyway.
exactly. Exactly. It's dumb.
Yeah, stupid
Also,
takes.
I love these pictures that like incorporate into the tweet,
Yeah, that
the
is a great
repost or whatever.
response to the original.
It's a great response. Yeah, yeah. All right, next up. This is what I consider the dilemma of Christian evangelism. So I don't even know how this applies to this specific scene in the Avengers. But you know whatever. It's the text that matters. It's how can is basically the dilemma is how do you like how do you speak the truth in love? How do you be loving towards someone while also showing them the reality of their sin and the eternal destination that comes along with that? It's tricky because you have first of all you have your progressive Christians that are just super affirmative, la di da, and then you have your Turner burn fiery Christians that like seem to only care about saving people from hell instead of bringing them to Christ. And of course, they're also just a massive turnoff to those who
Yeah,
may be giving religion a chance, or of course, skeptics who want to argue. It's very easy to, but like the thing is, both groups are wrong. So you have to find that perfect balance between the two, which
right.
is especially difficult because that balance could be different on a case by case basis.
Yeah. I don't have a real good solution to this, honestly. I don't
I
know
don't
if there
either.
is one.
That's why I consider it a dilemma. There really is
Yeah.
no absolute answer that you can get, at least not instantaneously, like you would need in most
Mhm.
confrontations.
I mean, I think the thing is like just rely on the Holy Spirit when doing evangelism, because like every situation is going to be a little bit different. Sometimes
Mhm.
the person needs the more affirmative, you are loved kind of thing. Like, I think there's a lot of people who kind of believe in like a works-based system of salvation. If I'm good enough,
Right.
I'll go to heaven. And what those
Mhm.
people do not need to hear is, well, you're bad, so you'll go to hell. I think most of those people
Right.
already know that. What they
Mhm.
need to hear is God loves you and he's made a way for you to go to heaven apart from your works, which it falls
Right.
on the
Right.
more loving side. But then there are
Mhm.
also people who absolutely need to hear the truth that, hey, you're very sinful, and if you don't follow Christ, you're going to go to hell.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's definitely tricky. It is the evangelism dilemma. What do you actually end up doing? Obviously, people who probably practice like direct evangelism, like street preachers or whatever, are going to probably have a lot more experience with this and be able to give a more fine
Right.
tuned answer, um, than like someone like us would be able to say. So, obviously, it's a tricky conversation, but like you got to avoid both extremes in most cases, or probably all
Absolutely.
cases. Yeah, absolutely extreme. Yeah. Okay. This. Um. This is dying over here. This
Oh
is
my
so much
gosh.
talking for like having a dead, like not great voice at the moment. Anyway, so
Oh yeah, that's
this
fair.
is Sam. I tend to like Sam. I don't agree with all of his takes, but he tends to have pretty good takes. um, so he's responding to this guy, which basically just it's just red pill stuff again.
Yeah. It's red pill trad
And
bro. The red pill trad bro
of
constitution,
course,
basically.
this is so what Samuel's doing is he's basically just exposing the fact that they are missing the actual purpose of Christianity.
Mhm.
It's not just go to church. It's not just um, i- like it's not just like go to church and have a family or something like that. It's actually deeper than that. You got to go. It's about seeking Christ, following Christ. It's not some aesthetic you can wear. That's the
Yeah.
purpose of Christianity.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I don't think that to be happy, every woman needs to get married and have kids and homeschool those
Mhm.
kids. That's not
That's
that's not the
also
ultimate
yeah.
good.
That's like one of the red pill loves their one size fits all type of rhetoric, which is stupid.
Yeah.
Um, Typical red pillars pretending like they're all knowing.
Mhm.
Ugh. Okay. Another Sam post. Oh, this is about Harry Potter. That's right.
Interesting.
This could be another theology topic, another episode, but
Yeah,
we
for
can maybe
real.
just briefly go over it here. Is the Harry Potter issue, the witchcraft and entertainment issue? Um, yeah. So I'll start with my take. My take, I think, um, are there people that have probably stumbled into real life witchcraft because of Harry Potter? Unfortunately, probably. Some of the Harry Potter fans are absolutely insane, but of course, that goes beyond what Harry Potter actually is. There's often going to be other maybe mental problems that are within that, or just maybe the culture around them.
Right.
However, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with watching Harry Potter. It's like because like not everyone who watches Harry Potter is going to all of a sudden try to cast spells. All right.
Yeah.
um, of course, there is going to be like that danger. I think, sure. Obviously, what Sam brings up is the famous magic and Lord of the Rings versus Harry Potter argument. Now I'm not a huge fan of this particular argument just because uh,
Mhm.
if you look at magic and Lord of the Rings, it's a lot more of a um, angelic type of thing. Like if you look at Gandalf, like
Yeah.
Gandalf is not human. He is, what is it? What do they call it? Do you know?
Oh, I want to. I don't.
Meyer, is it
I think that's the word. Yes, I'm not sure how
Meyer?
to pronounce it, but I believe
Yeah,
that is
whatever. So
it.
Gandalf is essentially an angel,
Yes.
and it's like even within the Bible, the angels perform supernatural stuff. They are supernatural beings. So I think this comparison might be a little bit unfair, but
Yeah.
but the point is that like just because there's magic in it does not necessarily equal like opening it's not necessarily going to like open up somebody to real life witchcraft. At least I
Right.
don't think so. In the vast majority of cases.
There was a time in my life when I actually believed that Christians, and not just me, all Christians should avoid reading Harry Potter, and I based that more on just the general rule in the Old Testament that forbid people from practicing magic, and I extrapolated that to reading about magic somehow. And my thoughts on the matter weren't like very clear cut, but there was a long time where I would try to avoid any content with magic in it, obviously. I don't really like the Harry Potter Lord of the Rings parallel, like you said, because I'm not sure there's a point in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf actually like casts a spell. I'm pretty sure he does at one point in The Hobbit, but it's still really different. But uh, where I'm at now, I don't really have any problem with Harry Potter or anything with magic for that matter. Like, I think there's absolutely people who should avoid reading Harry Potter because it could lead them down into like a really bad place that they shouldn't go. Or maybe if you have a history with this kind of witchcraft thing and you've become a Christian, maybe this is just something you can should avoid to avoid going back to that temptation or something like that. But I think at the end of the day, the Harry Potter series is it's a pretty good book series, and I think there's truth in it. There's some truth in it on its teachings on like human nature and morality and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And I
Yeah,
think this is a matter of conscience. Like if you don't think you should read Harry Potter, don't read Harry Potter. But I don't
right,
think we
right.
need to forbid all Christians from doing
Yeah, and
that.
I
I
mean,
think
I'm
it's
pretty
fine.
sure J.K. Rowling even said that in some way Harry Potter is a Jesus allegory. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, Harry Potter is a chosen one allegory. Any chosen one allegory could be applied to Jesus.
right.
So, like, I mean, like, how much weight does that actually? I don't know, but like, there are, but like, there's still good stuff in it. Like, it's not just like all bad values, like time and time again. Like,
Yeah,
that's just
absolutely.
not present within it. And so I just think again, like I agree with your consciousness take. Like if it's something that you think that you should stay away from because you know yourself better than I do, then I think that's perfectly fair. But I also think is that like first of all, like you could be completely manipulated by people fear
Mhm.
mongering about what it actually is. That's possible.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, if that's what you believe and that's what you gotta do, that's fine. I'm not gonna stop you with that. But you just got like I just think that the vast majority of people in today's day and age who are against it probably are so because of like a Facebook post from 10 years ago.
Yeah, probably.
No, yeah. Anyways, that's my take. Yeah. Got anything
All right.
else? That's all. That's all my Twitter.
Yeah, I
All
think
my
that's all we've
yeah
got for
stuff
tonight.
here. All right, perfect. Cool. All right, hour 20. It's that's not bad. That's not bad.
That's
Anyways, yeah,
fairly average for us.
fairly average. Sure, sure. All right. Well, if you stayed this long, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, see you in the next one. Thank you to the 40 people who watched the last one as well. That was great. Please,
Hmm.
more people watch this one. Like, comment, all that jazz.
Oh yeah.